I was jogging along the path that connects my small office to my home, a distance of about 2 miles. My frustration with some incomplete work tasks had pushed me to take this run. After an hour of grappling with those tasks, I changed out of my jeans and work shirt into shorts, a t-shirt, sneakers, and a headband, then set off. My plan was simple: jog home to grab some paperwork, around 20 pages. When I was roughly half a mile from home, I noticed a man about 200 yards ahead. It was unusual to see anyone on this path, as it was mainly used by me and was secluded, leading directly to my house and bordered by a cliff. The man seemed to be heading toward the back of my house. Quickening my pace, I rounded a corner for a better view. I saw him at the back patio door, which to my surprise was unlocked. I paused for a moment, realizing that my wife, Rachel, was supposed to be working from home that day. Racing to the door, I found it locked but used my key to open it. I slid the patio door open quietly and peered inside. The kitchen, where Rachel usually worked, was empty, though her work materials and laptop were scattered on the table. I could hear faint sounds coming from upstairs, likely from the dining room next to the kitchen. I kept a baton with me, a relic from my grandfather, used both for protection and as a sentimental keepsake. Gripping it tightly, I crept up the stairs. The master bedroom door was shut, with muffled noises coming from within. I grasped the handle and cautiously pushed the door open. To my shock, the man's runner attire was strewn on the floor as he was positioned over my wife, who was completely naked. I approached the bed and delivered a swift blow to the man's rear with the baton, making a loud crack. He yelped in pain, clutching his backside, while Rachel looked on in stunned silence, her eyes wide and her limbs splayed out. She muttered something incoherent. It became clear that this intruder was none other than her boss, Nathan Clark. Nathan rolled off Rachel, wincing from the baton strike. "Hold on, I was invited," he protested. I looked at Rachel, who remained utterly silent. Nathan, oozing arrogance, threatened me, saying, "You better back off or I'll take it from you and give you a smacking." He stood confidently, undressed in my bedroom, unaware of my skills. What he didn't realize was my proficiency in tennis, especially my powerful backhand. With a smirk, I noticed his agitation. As he lunged at me from about 6 feet away, I quickly delivered a backhand strike to his face. He was caught off guard and couldn't avoid it. The baton hit him on the right side of his forehead. I had aimed for his cheek, but his downward movement caused the misalignment. He crumpled to the floor like a sack of bricks, motionless. Looking down at him, I noticed Rachel appeared dazed, her eyes glazed, and drool trickling down her chin. Scanning the room, I spotted a cell phone on the dresser, upright with the screen facing the bed. The fool had recorded everything. I grabbed the phone, flipped it to the dial pad, and called emergency services. "What's your emergency?" the operator asked. "My name is Michael Andrews. I'm at 12 Arbor Circle. An intruder attacked me in my bedroom. I defended myself. He's hurt, possibly seriously. And my wife, she's, I don't know, maybe on medication. She's conscious but not responsive. We need help right away." "Sir, if you're armed, please disarm yourself. We'll approach cautiously. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand. I'll wait in the front yard." As the sirens blared, I descended the stairs with the phone still in hand. I placed the baton on the sofa and stepped outside. Standing in the front yard with my arms at my sides, I watched as a police car and an ambulance arrived. 2 officers, a man and a woman, emerged without drawing their weapons. The woman, clearly in charge, approached me. "Are you Mr. Andrews?" she asked. "Yes." "They're upstairs. Follow me." I led them back into the house. At the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar, I stepped aside. Rachel lay on the bed, her eyes vacant, while Clark remained still. The female officer knelt beside Clark to check his pulse and instructed another officer to call for paramedics. She then turned to Rachel and asked, "Ma'am, are you all right?" There was no response. As paramedics arrived, I stepped back to let them handle Clark. A second group of medical personnel soon joined them. Sergeant Riley Ripley retrieved a robe from the closet, dressed Rachel, and led her to the guest bedroom, instructing me to follow. "Stay here, don't leave, but keep out of the way," she directed. I retreated to the kitchen, scanning the area. I used a small computer from my desk drawer to transfer the video from Clark's phone and back up its contents. I emailed the video to my office, powered down the phone, and left it on Rachel's desk. From the kitchen entrance, I watched as the paramedics carried Clark out, loaded him into the ambulance, and drove away. An unfamiliar policewoman led Rachel to the living room, keeping her separate from me. Rachel walked with her head down, dressed in a robe and sneakers. Sergeant Haddon joined me in the kitchen, accompanied by an older, slender plainclothes detective named Bob Parker. Detective Parker was introduced to me by Sergeant Haddon, although we were already acquainted. My current practice focused on civil law, but I'd previously worked with Parker on criminal defense cases. I respected him highly and felt we had a good working relationship. "Hi, Michael. I'm really sorry about what's happened," Parker said, addressing me directly. "Do you know the person you hit?" "That's Nathan Clark, my wife's boss," I answered. "Do you have any information about his place of residence? We found his belongings, sports gear, and credit card, but no ID." "I don't know much about him, Bob. The last update I got was that he was married with children in school, maybe a year ago." "Was there any sign of a romantic connection between him and your wife?" "Not until today." "Can you describe what led up to the incident?" I laid out everything in detail: my decision to go for a run to clear my head, the call to emergency services, and all the events that followed. "I had no reason to do this," I insisted. "Did you recognize Clark when you were outside?" "No, it wasn't until he was out of bed that I realized who he was." "You struck him on the rear end?" "Yes, I didn't intend to cause severe harm, but I needed him away from my wife regardless of her feelings. Then you struck him again. Why?" "He threatened to take the baton and use it on me. When he charged at me, he roared." "He roared?" "Yeah, it seemed like he was trying to scare me. It worked. I aimed lower, not at his head. He must have ducked or lowered his head." "All right, your wife doesn't seem to be involved. We're checking her for medications. Once she's more coherent, she should back up your story." "This phone belonged to Clark," I said. "He might have recorded the incident. The struggle could be on video." "Why is the phone here?" "I used it to call for help, then left it open. When I went outside, Parker had a crime scene tech handle it. I asked about Rachel's condition." "Not sure yet. Let's see," Sergeant Haddon replied. We moved to the living room where Rachel sat with an officer and a medic. Parker asked the medic, "What's going on with Mrs. Andrews?" "We're taking her to the county hospital for a precautionary check. She seems to be in shock. Her vital signs are stable." I looked at Rachel, and our eyes met for a brief moment. A tear rolled down her right cheek. "I'm so sorry, Michael," she whispered, then seemed to slip back into a trance. "Rachel, Rachel!" I called out, feeling a pang of frustration as she remained unresponsive. Shortly after, she was taken by ambulance. I changed into clothes from the basement and followed in our car. The police assured me they would secure the house or leave someone behind. I called Rachel's parents, who lived about 2 hours away, and gave them a brief update, promising to keep them informed from the hospital. Rachel and I had married when she was fresh out of college at 21, while I was still a year away from finishing law school. She quickly landed a job at Nathan Clark's insurance firm, where she advanced from a clerk to an administrative assistant in his department, dealing with housing and automobiles. I attended company events with her and never saw any signs of wrongdoing. This was my first encounter with the Clark family. She had been with the company for over 6 years, and until today, I believed our marriage was rock solid. I had little doubt that any involvement between them was consensual, unless he somehow had drugged her. This incident would likely end our marriage. I struggled to understand how he could have drugged her. There simply hadn't been enough time. I assumed she was expecting him, likely unclothed, and had left the back door ajar. I wondered how often this had happened. I loved Rachel deeply. She was beautiful, cheerful, and kind. Our intimate life was satisfying despite our busy schedules, especially on weekends. With my shift away from criminal trials, my work had become more predictable. I couldn't grasp what I had seen. Although Clark was physically larger, today's events suggested otherwise, at least in crucial moments. Yet, I had only seen a fleeting glimpse. Who could say for sure? At the hospital, I saw Nathan Clark's wife in the ER. Although I recognized her, she seemed oblivious to my presence. I left things as they were and asked about Rachel. Granted permission, I returned to her room where she was sleeping. I watched her, feeling a deep sense of confusion and loss. I needed to understand what had happened before making any tough decisions. A female doctor in a white coat entered the room. "I'm Dr. Moore. Are you her husband?" I nodded. What's her condition? She experienced trauma that led to a loss of consciousness due to shock. Once she wakes up, she should return to normal. When will that be? Probably in 3 to 4 hours, depending on the medication. Thank you, I'll stay here. As she prepared to leave, I stopped her. What about Nathan Clark? How is he? No relation, she said. He's in a medically induced coma due to a severe head injury. With that, she left. I contemplated Clark's fate, initially believing I'd caused his death, but now unsure. I called Rachel's parents to update them. They considered coming over, but I advised against it, explaining that Rachel and I needed to sort through this situation, likely involving her affair with her boss. Carol Jacob, Rachel's mother, voiced concern about Rachel's recent change in behavior and urged me to give Rachel a chance to explain. I promised Carol Jacob, Rachel's mother, that I would give Rachel a chance to explain, though I wasn't sure how much it would help. The situation was overwhelming, and I needed time to process everything. I sought out Mrs. Clark, hoping to gain some clarity. I found her in the ICU waiting area, looking distressed. Hello, Mrs. Clark? Yes, she responded, her voice tinged with frustration. I'm Michael Andrews. My wife Rachel works at your husband's company. Her expression shifted, and she seemed to recognize me. Acquainted? She asked, her tone flat. Yes, I replied. They were discovered together this morning, in my bedroom. They were. Quite close. Mrs. Clark's face showed a flicker of understanding. Ah, you're the one who struck him? Yes, I said, though I'm not exactly sorry about it. Well, she continued, Nathan has been acting strangely lately. He's neglected his usual activities, claiming he's been swamped with work. I suspected he was preoccupied with your wife. They seem to have established a routine, though I can't confirm the details. What did the doctors say about his condition? I asked, my voice laced with concern. They were non-committal, she said. He might need surgery. I hope for the best, I said. Will you be taking your children? They're with my parents, Mrs. Clark replied. They know he's in the hospital, but there's nothing out of the ordinary. I stepped outside to clear my head. The weight of the situation was suffocating. I decided to wait for Rachel to regain full consciousness before making any decisions. After an hour, I returned to the emergency room. Rachel was still behind the curtain, and she appeared to be stirring. I took a seat, trying to stay calm, but soon I dozed off. I woke to the sound of Rachel's faint moans. Her eyes fluttered open briefly before closing again. Alarmed, I rushed to find Dr. Moore, who was at the nurse's station. I signaled to her, and she approached quickly. It looks like she's waking up, though I'm not sure if your presence will help, Dr. Moore said, as she entered the enclosure where Rachel lay. Just then, Rachel lost consciousness again. Please wait here, Dr. Moore instructed. Through the thin curtain, I could hear their exchange. How are you feeling, Rachel? Can you speak? Rachel's voice was weak. I'm so sorry. Rachel, we need you to be fully conscious. You need to acknowledge what's happening. We can't let you stay detached from the situation. We'll discharge you this afternoon, perhaps in 2 hours. Where's Michael? He was here earlier, but we thought you might respond better if he stepped out. He's nearby. I wonder how long this will last, Rachel murmured. I messed up badly. And Nathan, how is he? We're not sure yet, Dr. Moore said. He might need surgery. Damn, Rachel said, her voice tinged with regret. I warned him about taking risks. Maybe I'll pay the price too. You should talk to Michael, Dr. Moore suggested. I can find him, or it can wait until we're home. I drew back the curtain and entered the room. Rachel, I'll take you home soon, okay? I said gently. Thank you, she whispered. I'm really sorry. We'll talk, I replied, turning to Dr. Moore. When can we leave? Right away, she said. I'll handle the paperwork and get you some medical attire. Dr. Moore left, and Rachel murmured, I'm sorry, Michael. It's not a big deal. As Dr. Moore provided Rachel with a medical form, I stepped outside to give her some privacy while she changed. I wasn't sure I wanted to see her undressed, possibly ever again. They wheeled Rachel out in a wheelchair, and I pulled the car up to the exit. She climbed in, and we drove home in silence. Her tears flowed freely, but she said nothing. When we arrived home, I unlocked the front door, and we stepped into what was once our sanctuary. The police had cleared out, and the house was in relatively good condition, though the aftermath of the morning's chaos was evident. Rachel settled into the rocking chair in the living room. "I'll check upstairs," I said. "Be right back." I ascended the stairs to find the bedroom in disarray. The carpet where Nathan Clark had fallen was torn up, the bed stripped down to the mattress, and drawers pulled out but not completely closed. The bathroom had fingerprint powder scattered around, marking the area where the police had investigated. I resolved to clean up later. Other rooms appeared undisturbed, except for the bathroom. I didn't relish the idea of confronting Rachel just yet. I called her parents to let them know she had returned home. They were relieved but wanted to visit. I told them it was best to wait until Rachel and I had a chance to sort things out. "Would you like anything?" I asked Rachel, returning to the living room. "Coffee? Water?" Rachel met my gaze but declined. We sat across from each other on the sofa, a chasm of silence between us. "What happened, Rachel?" I finally asked. "I thought everything was okay." "It's complicated, Michael," she began. "I've worked for Nathan all these years. I've always respected him. But it was more than that. Sometimes he made flirtatious comments about my appearance. He started getting more touchy, putting his hand on my arm or shoulder. It caught me off guard. Then he asked me out to lunch, just the two of us." "But didn't you find it odd?" I pressed. "His sudden change in behavior? Didn't it strike you as strange?" "Maybe a little," she admitted, looking down. "I was flattered. He's attractive. I found myself intrigued. It took me a while to acknowledge it." "So you realized he was trying to seduce you. What did you decide?" "I wanted to see where it would lead," she said, burying her face in her hands before looking up again. At that point, I knew we were in trouble. It wasn't a case of being tricked or dazed. I wanted it. We went to dinner, and I asked him why he was pursuing me now after all this time. "And what did he say?" I asked, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "He said he'd always desired me but had suppressed it," Rachel replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words settling heavily over us. "Those were his words, Michael," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "Why? What's wrong with me that you weren't enough? He claimed I was routine for you, but exciting and new to him. Just the thought of it turned me on." "Why didn't you talk to me about this?" I demanded, struggling to contain my frustration. What could I have said? "I'm considering cheating for some excitement?" Rachel looked down, her eyes filling with tears. "It never crossed my mind. How many times did you two have lovemaking, Rachel?" "Not once," she said. "Today was supposed to be the first and only time. But then you showed up. I was terrified when I saw you. The look on your face. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was the same as always. A quick glance, and then you struck him with the baton." "I figured the police should have questioned you first," I said. "But screw them. I had no choice. He charged at me. It all happened so fast." "Rachel, I don't buy that this was the first time," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I caught him sneaking in through the back door. It wasn't locked, and it didn't take me long to get inside and upstairs. But there you both were, undressed. He was inches away from being intimate with you. You wanted it too. I think this isn't your first rodeo." "No, Michael," Rachel insisted. "Nathan and I kissed in his car 2 days ago. We flirted, but I stopped him from going further. I suggested he could come over after you left for work. It all seems so improbable," I said. "Think about it. If you saw what I saw, what would you believe?" Rachel's eyes pleaded with me. "You have to trust me, or maybe not. I don't know how to make you believe me. And now, I'll never be able to trust what you say." "What should I do, Michael?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I love you. I don't like Nathan. He just made me want him." "How?" I asked. "He's forceful. He says what he wants. He wanted me. And apparently you wanted him too." "I need time to process all this," I said, feeling a wave of frustration. "If I acted on my feelings right now, we'd be headed for divorce. I can't erase what I saw." "Okay," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. "But please remember I love you. I'm so sorry you're hurting." Her words were heartfelt, but they barely scratched the surface of the turmoil I felt. I turned and left, heading upstairs to our home office. I needed to clear my head. In the office, I began going through Nathan Clark's phone, which I had retrieved from the scene. Rachel's phone had received numerous calls from Nathan over the past 2 months, always in the evenings. There was no need to call during work hours. I also found texts discussing lunch dates. They had met about twice a week for 5 weeks. Since Rachel worked from home 3 days a week, This meant she had lunch with Nathan every day she went into the office. I decided to watch the video from Nathan's phone. It began with Nathan following Rachel upstairs, her in a short robe. She stepped into the bedroom, and he was quickly on the floor. The video flickered as Nathan positioned the phone on the dresser, focusing it on the bed. "You look stunning, Rachel, just as I always envisioned," Nathan remarked, his voice dripping with desire. "Thank you, Sai," Rachel replied, seated on the bed. Nathan eagerly shed his shorts and shirt. "I need you right now," he asserted forcefully. Rachel reclined on her back, inviting him forward. "All right, let's do this. I want it too," she encouraged. The video cut off abruptly as I burst through the door and struck Nathan. The audio captured a resounding slap followed by his cry. I watched until I grabbed the phone and dialed emergency services. After viewing the video, I couldn't be certain if Rachel was truthful about it being their first encounter. Perhaps it would indeed be a one-time occurrence, as she claimed. But doubts lingered, especially given Nathan's position as her boss. Returning to the living room, I informed Rachel that I needed to return to work to finish up some tasks. It was already past 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I jogged back, my anger now outweighing my concern for Rachel's feelings. Once at the office, I stopped my task to research divorce laws. In our state, infidelity was grounds for divorce, though it was rarely pursued. It could be initiated after 6 months of separation with a signed separation and property agreement. If one party refused to sign, the process could drag on, potentially for 18 months. Though I wasn't certain about divorcing Rachel, I was definite about seeking separation. I drafted an agreement outlining the terms. We would live apart, manage our finances separately, and be responsible for our own expenses. We agreed to refrain from any carnal relations between us, and to avoid engaging in such activity with others. Violating this clause would allow the other party to proceed with divorce swiftly. I printed 3 copies and headed home. Rachel was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, a simple meal of spaghetti with meat sauce and salad. She wore a tracksuit, no makeup, and looked at me shyly, barefoot. "It smells great," I remarked, attempting to sound positive. "Thanks," she said. "Need any help?" "I've got it covered," I replied. "But if you want carrots in the salad, they're in the fridge." I chopped some carrots and added them to the bowl. We ate quietly, accompanied by red wine. Afterward, we washed the dishes together. "Let's talk in the living room," I suggested, noticing Rachel's apprehension. We moved to the living room and Rachel spoke softly. "Michael, I want to reiterate how sorry I am." I sat down, ready to hear her out, knowing that this conversation would shape the future of our relationship. "I'm trying to understand my mistakes," Rachel said, her voice laden with regret. "I've decided to seek professional help. Everything's okay, but I believe we need to separate. I'll find an apartment nearby. You can stay here." I looked at her, my mind racing. "Are you sure about this? I feel so guilty. Do you want a divorce? Are we parting ways?" "This seems like a step in that direction," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "However, I haven't made a final decision. I just need some space to think. That's why I drafted a separation agreement." I handed her the document. Rachel read through it, her tears falling silently. "I've already signed it," she said, looking up at me with a pleading expression. "Can we wait a few days before finalizing this? I want to arrange for my mom to come here." "I can wait a bit," I agreed, trying to mask my own turmoil. "Let's set a time to finalize everything. Take your time and let me know, Michael. I'm serious about what I said. I'm seeking counseling. Perhaps you could join if the therapist suggests it." "I still love you, Rachel," I said, my voice strained. "But I'm confused and incredibly angry. It feels like I'll never be the same." "I feel the same way," Rachel said, sobbing. "But you did this. The person I thought you were isn't who you turned out to be. You got caught, but you're still the same person, just not the woman I loved." Her words cut deeply, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. "The woman I loved would never do this. You're not her. Maybe you're similar, maybe not. I feel like our entire life together has been a lie. The only question is, how much of a lie?" I headed upstairs, gathering essentials from the master bedroom, enough to last for the next day. I moved to the guest room, feeling the weight of our crumbling relationship pressing down on me. The next day was a work day, and I barely slept. I rose early, dressed, and went to work, stepping out around 9 a.m. to grab a McMuffin. Surprisingly, I managed to focus on work, sending out emails and jotting down notes in the judge's office. The distraction of work was a relief, giving me a brief respite from the turmoil of my personal life. During lunch, I researched apartment rentals and scheduled a viewing for Friday morning at a place just 2 blocks from work. The day passed swiftly, offering a temporary escape. By 5:30 p.m., I secured a 3-bedroom house on lease for 2 months. Though it had been our home for 4 years, it no longer felt like mine. Entering through the sliding back door, I noticed Rachel cooking fish stew. The aroma filled the kitchen, a reminder of better times. She looked up at me, and I greeted her. "I made fish stew," she said quietly. "It smells delicious," I replied. "Thank you." "I'll change now," she said, disappearing into the bedroom. As we dined, Rachel mentioned, "My mother will arrive on Saturday. Have you found a place for yourself?" "I might check out the apartment tomorrow," I said. "We could sign the papers tomorrow evening. I won't be here on Saturday anyway." "It doesn't have to be like this, Michael," she insisted. "I promise you it won't happen again." "Promises can easily be broken," I countered, meeting her gaze. "You're letting your hurt feelings cloud your judgment. What's the wise course here? Ignore your betrayal? You could try to make things right, but don't brush it under the rug. Forgive." "I'm sorry, Rachel," I said, my voice tinged with resignation. "Whether forgiveness is possible remains uncertain, but I will never forget what happened, especially what I saw on that video. If you want, I can email you a copy." Rachel began to sob uncontrollably. "I didn't mean to be harsh. I just wanted you to understand what I saw. Maybe one day you'll forgive me for intruding." With that, she hurried up the stairs. I tidied up and arranged for a studio apartment with a lovely view of a small park midway between my workplace and our former home. The place lacked furnishings, so I arranged for a bed, sofas, and armchairs to be delivered. The expenses were burdensome, but necessary. Contemplating Rachel's future, I realized I might need to increase financial support if her job situation changed. During lunch, my thoughts drifted to reconciliation with Rachel, and I concluded that it seemed highly improbable. I remembered Angela Morgan, a friend from work whom I had dated before meeting Rachel. Despite our past, we remained friends. Angela had been somewhat fickle, her brief fling with a fraternity guy only reinforcing that impression. She had eventually married a fellow student and seemed to lead a stable life. I dialed her number. "Shelley, it's Michael." "Damn, Michael, what's up?" she answered. "I heard you confronted Clark." "Not my doing. It was self-defense," I replied. "Well, I'm free for lunch," Shelley said. "How about it?" "Agreed," I responded. We arranged to meet in a couple of hours. At the restaurant, we hugged, settled in, and placed our orders. "So spill it," Shelley said, her eyes filled with concern. I recounted my story, knowing that I could trust her. After I finished, she revealed, "I've heard chatter about Nathan Clark. Rumors suggest he's spiraling and might be headed for divorce." The weight of her words lingered, adding another layer to the mess I was trying to navigate. "There's talk that Rachel is involved with him," Shelley said, her voice low. I found that hard to believe. "What else did you hear? What did you witness?" I asked, my frustration evident. "Casual lunches, office encounters, the rest is just speculation. He's changing, you know. Clark, I mean. Seems like he's always on the hunt now. The office gossip is all about it." "So Rachel isn't the only one he's after?" I inquired. "Maybe not, but she seems like a top target. They're together every day," Shelley replied. "No offense, but why didn't you tell me?" "I thought about it," Shelley said, her tone apologetic, "but I figured she wouldn't make a move, and reaching out to you could stir up trouble." "What's your plan?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "I've rented a place and drafted a separation agreement for 6 months, but I'm unsure about everything," I admitted. "Did you talk to her?" "What's the point? She's already apologized and promised not to repeat it." "It's a tough situation," I said, rubbing my temples. "How's everything with you?" "Oh, Big Bill and Little Will are doing great. Little Will's 3 now, full of energy and starting preschool soon," Shelley said, her face lighting up. "But you don't have to listen to my issues. Yours are heavier. I could use a break, though." "If there's anything I can help with," I offered. "Nothing major," Shelley said with a sigh. "Bill's away a lot for work, and when he's back, he's distant, not like before. Hearing about Rachel makes me think." "I've decided to take action," I said, cutting her off. "Shelley, what do you think? Should I investigate a bit more?" He's a good guy, family and all, Shelley said cautiously. But I need reassurance. Just talk to him. You both know how to work it out. Express your concerns. I'm anxious about it, I admitted. He might see it as a lack of trust. Be gentle. Diplomatic, perhaps, Shelley advised. Thanks, I said, feeling a bit more grounded. I hope both you and Rachel pull through. We weren't friends in school for reasons, you know, Shelley said with a bittersweet smile. Still, I thought she was good for you. After lunch, we hugged and parted ways. I hoped Shelley would stay safe. Back home, I heard that Rachel was back at work, which was a relief. She hadn't been fired, but I was increasingly certain that it was the end for us. With no kids between us and Rachel not holding up her end of the deal, it felt like it was over. I didn't want to start fresh with new responsibilities. It was a sad realization, but it felt right. Since I moved last Saturday, I hadn't contacted Rachel. A week had passed, and she left me 3 voicemails asking to talk. I hadn't responded. She texted that she was on probation at work but still employed. On Saturday afternoon, I strolled by the house, heading straight to the patio door and knocked. Susan, Rachel's mother, answered. Hey, Susan, is Rachel here? I asked. She's out. She'll be back soon, Susan replied, a hint of unease in her voice. Look, Susan, Rachel is really confused about everything. Have you made any decisions? I pressed. I just wanted to talk to Rachel, I said. Susan, where'd she go? Susan seemed flustered. She's with a friend. Who's the friend? I demanded. Did she stay here or somewhere else? Michael, she wasn't doing well. A friend came by and they went out to eat, Susan said, trying to avoid eye contact. Susan, was that dinner last night? I pressed. You can't keep this from me. I noticed Susan blocking the kitchen door on purpose. As I headed towards the front door, a new Mustang pulled up. A blonde guy got out, circled the car, and opened the passenger door for Rachel, who looked ready for a date. I rushed over. Hey, Rachel, came to see you. She spun around, shocked, while the guy appeared uneasy. Michael, this is Ethan from work. He drove me last night, Rachel stammered. I remained composed, but with an edge in my voice. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. I was just trying to help, Ethan said, starting to retreat. Cut the act. You got what you wanted. Stick around and you'll get more than you bargained for, I warned. Ethan, younger and of my height, stood taller, clearly upset. Rachel shouted, Stop! Just stop, Ethan. It's time for you to go. Ethan nodded, emphasizing you, as he got back in his car and drove off. I turned to Rachel. You didn't even last a week without breaking the agreement about no lovemaking. I'll bring this up when the papers are ready for you to be served. Michael, I'm sorry. I was vulnerable and knew we were broken up, Rachel pleaded. But I do love you, even if it doesn't seem like it. You just needed some excitement, didn't you? I said, my voice tinged with disappointment. What happened to you? We don't need to talk anymore. Get a lawyer, I said flatly. I turned and walked away, taking the path around the back to go home. The decision was straightforward, though I was taken aback. We had been together a long time without any of this. She was attractive, and men probably noticed her often. I wondered why she'd started giving in to them now. I returned to my new place, contemplating whether I'd ever truly understand her reasons or if I'd simply move on. A week later, I managed to catch Susan alone when Rachel was likely at work. I slipped into the house and knocked on the patio door. Susan let me in. Why are you here, Michael? Susan asked. I wanted to understand what happened, if possible, I said. We were doing great, and then she changed. Any idea why? Susan sighed. Perhaps she struggled with self-esteem. Growing up, she wasn't seen as attractive by boys. Throughout high school, she was flat-chested and thin. Her 2 friends developed faster, becoming popular cheerleaders. Rachel lagged behind in popularity and drifted from them. But at 17, she changed, filled out in all the right places, and her acne cleared up. Suddenly, boys noticed her. She went to prom with a football player, lost her innocence at 18, and had a wild summer. She used birth control and stayed healthy as far as I know. I nodded, absorbing the information. It provided some context but did little to ease the pain. The mystery of Rachel's transformation and her choices would likely remain unresolved. When we first met in college, Rachel didn't come across as overly eager or focused on physical aspects. She seemed relatively normal but was more experienced than me. She was upfront about her likes and desires. From the moment we started dating, she had been steadfastly faithful. Susan paused, then asked, "Were you two talking about having kids?" "Yes," I said. "We had plans to start a family, but that's off the table now." "Maybe she was scared that having a child would make her less appealing to others," Susan suggested thoughtfully. "It seems she might have turned to her boss for reassurance because he was pursuing her. That's my best guess." "What about the guy with the Mustang?" I inquired. "Same thing," Susan replied. A flashy car and a young guy made her feel desired. But deep down, she knew she might not end up married or have kids. It seems she was just after some excitement. "How long will you be around?" Susan asked. "Not too long," I said. "I need to move on." "Take care, Michael," Susan said as we parted ways. The divorce proceedings went smoothly. Rachel moved out of our rented place and found a new apartment closer to her job. We lost touch after that. The day after the divorce hearing, as I was leaving the courthouse, Rachel approached me. "Let's have lunch, Michael. I'll treat. There's something I need to discuss." "Okay," I agreed. We chose Red Lobster for lunch. I ordered an appetizer and Rachel had soup. After our food was served, she looked at me with a serious expression. "Michael, I've made a mess of things," Rachel began. "I've been seeing a therapist, and she thinks I was afraid of having kids. I'm not sure if that's the whole story. Maybe I'm just not cut out for commitment." "What happened with Nathan?" I asked. "I haven't heard much since," Rachel said. "He's back to working part-time and uses a cane now. His wife left him, which is tough, but maybe it was for the best." "That seems pretty harsh," I commented. Rachel looked at me. "You really turned Nathan's life upside down, Michael, and in the process, you and he messed up mine, but maybe not as badly as you messed up your own life. By the way, how are you?" she asked, her voice softening. "I miss our life together. I'm enjoying the freedom I have now. I can be as active as I want with other guys, and it excites me. I'm not sure why this urge has come back. Nathan reminded me of the guy from prom who took my virginity. Maybe I'm trying to relive those days." "And now you can live them out," I said, masking my frustration. "You're free to seek pleasure wherever you can." "That's quite blunt," Rachel replied with a chuckle. "But it wasn't meant to be funny." I forced a smile. "I see the irony," I said. Rachel continued. "A new guy always gets me going. But honestly, I miss our family life. I haven't found anyone better in bed than you. There might have been others who were just as good, maybe even bigger. But we knew each other so well. You always satisfied me completely. I was foolish." Our conversation about her promiscuous behavior had me on edge. I couldn't hide my discomfort, and Rachel noticed. "You still find me attractive, don't you?" she asked with a hopeful look. "I'm always here for you." She began to sing softly. "Just call my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again." Her smile was both inviting and bittersweet. "Rachel," I said, feeling conflicted. She had always been the most attractive woman to me, more than anyone else I'd ever known. Our waitress Chloe brought our food. Rachel quickly left a generous tip of $30. "We need to head out," she said, pulling me towards the exit. Chloe glanced at me with a knowing smile and then blushed slightly. "I see you two need some privacy," Chloe said, her eyes twinkling. "Come back later, big guy. I'm off at 6. Rachel shot Chloe an annoyed look and dragged me outside. Her apartment was just a short walk away. We entered the building, took the elevator up, and as soon as the doors closed, Rachel kissed me with an urgent passion. She pressed me against the wall, her hands roaming over me. "This is going to be incredible," she whispered breathlessly. I was panting, and the elevator doors opened to reveal two surprised women. We hurried past them. One of them greeted, "Hey, Rachel." Rachel didn't acknowledge them and quickly ushered me into her apartment. I nearly tripped over a small table as we entered. We swiftly undressed. Rachel scanned me with a hungry gaze, and I did the same. She licked her lips with anticipation. I led her to the bedroom and laid her on the bed. "Take me now," she urged, her voice demanding. She flipped me onto my back. "I told you I'd pin you down," she said with a playful smirk. Our encounter was both brief and intense, leaving us both thoroughly satisfied. Afterwards, we lay together, catching our breath. Maybe I should have thought about how strange it was to climax on the day of our divorce, Rachel mused aloud. But that's for another day. She sat up, looking at me with a mixture of satisfaction and regret. "That was the best lovemaking we've ever had. I should have left you sooner." I felt a new wave of arousal. We continued our passionate encounter, which was prolonged and intense. Rachel reached climax multiple times, her pleasure as intense as the best moments of our marriage. Then I reached my peak, feeling the same intensity as before. Afterwards, I rolled away from her, thinking that staying any longer might lead to further complications. The divorce was finalized that morning, and Rachel and I spent the rest of the night together. We had a light meal and I suggested going back to Red Lobster, but Rachel declined, saying we had soup from the fridge. We stayed in, eating casually, and then made love again, exploring each other's desires. Rachel eventually looked at me, her eyes reflecting both longing and a tinge of sadness. "Should we talk or keep going?" she asked. Without hesitation, I stood up, took her hand, and said, "Let's go." Our encounters were a mix of slow, tender moments and intense, passionate experiences. We knew each other's triggers well, and sometimes it felt like a challenge to see who could drive the other to the edge first. Neither of us won, but the experience was undeniably thrilling. The following morning, we were physically engaged again before Rachel made breakfast. As we sat down to eat, I felt the need to address our situation more seriously. "Rachel, I hope we can maintain this," I began tentatively. "Michael, I've come to realize that marrying was a mistake," she admitted. "I tried to honor my promise to be faithful, but I've learned that I can't. That doesn't mean I want you completely out of my life. Remember when I referenced the Ethan Taylor song? I wasn't joking." "But Rachel," I countered, "there will come a time when I'll want to settle down and have children. Maybe that's what led you to seek other men. I enjoy being with you physically. You're the best I've ever had. I think we could keep this going until one of us decides otherwise." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. For now, let's continue as we are. We both enjoy this, and until one of us wants something different, it's fine." The weekend was spent in a cocoon of intimacy. We stayed in bed, only emerging briefly to eat, shower, or use the bathroom. On Saturday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Rachel quickly slipped into her robe and went to answer it. To my surprise, it was Hannah, the woman from the elevator. Despite being older, she still looked great. "Rachel, I haven't seen you in a while," Hannah said, her tone warm and concerned. "I just wanted to check in and make sure you're okay." "I'm doing quite well, Hannah," Rachel replied, her smile radiant. She glanced over at me, and Hannah followed her gaze. "Very well, actually." Hannah looked at us both, a hint of understanding in her eyes. "I see. Enjoy yourselves. You're fortunate, Rachel. I won't worry anymore." "Thanks," Rachel said, closing the door softly behind Hannah. She turned to me with a playful giggle. "You really gave her a show. Maybe you should have invited her in for coffee. She might have enjoyed it with cream," I teased. Rachel laughed, pulling off my shorts. "I can't let that happen. Too much cholesterol," she retorted. On Monday, we both went back to work without having resolved anything. All day, I pondered our situation. I couldn't envision a long-term relationship with Rachel. We lacked the foundation for a true partnership. However, as long as our physical chemistry was strong, I was willing to continue. I knew I wanted a family and children eventually, but I would be cautious until I found someone suitable. Rachel had taught me a hard lesson, but the idea of her being promiscuous was oddly exciting. I stayed vigilant about my health, getting tested regularly for STDs, all results coming back negative. One day, as I passed the courthouse, I encountered a woman who seemed familiar. "We haven't met before, have we?" she asked, looking puzzled. I recognized her immediately. "You're Chloe, the waitress from Red Lobster," I said. "Yes, that's right. It's strange I forgot, but I didn't get a good look at you then," Chloe said, her blue eyes sparkling. "I'm Michael, by the way. Are you still working at the restaurant?" "Part-time. I also do some modeling," Chloe replied. Chloe was an attractive blonde with a slender, well-defined figure. "I remember you mentioned meeting up at 6, I said. "Rachel and I spent the entire weekend together." Are you two back together?" Chloe inquired. "No," I explained. "That day was right after our divorce was finalized. It kind of reignited something between us." "That's odd," Chloe said. "Are you still seeing each other?" "We're dating. We have a good physical connection but lack other compatibility," I replied. Chloe smiled, her interest evident. "Maybe you should take me out sometime. I'm free today." "How about dinner at my place tonight? I'll cook," I suggested. "That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it," Chloe said with enthusiasm. That evening, Chloe arrived around 6:30, looking stunning in a chic evening dress and sandals. I had prepared a meal of fried chicken and fried rice. We enjoyed a pleasant conversation as we ate. Chloe, 25, was balancing her modeling career with her job as a waitress. She had ended a long-term relationship about 10 months prior. At 34, I was settled in a successful law firm and living independently with a good car. My relationships with Rachel, Hannah, and a woman from the courthouse had been more casual, but I was ready for something more committed. Chloe's charm and the prospect of a serious relationship with her were appealing. I decided to pursue this new path and see where it led. On our first night out, we agreed that I would drive Chloe home. As we stood at her doorstep, she kissed me softly. While I was thrilled by the gesture, she didn't immediately take things to the next level. Over time, as our relationship deepened, I found myself falling for her. Chloe was not only attractive but also incredibly intelligent. I believed that she felt the same way about me. By our third date, our physical connection intensified, and it was a beautiful experience that left me feeling profoundly connected to her. That night, I made a decision to end my relationships with the other women I had been seeing. A few weeks later, after a particularly passionate encounter with Chloe, she revealed that she sometimes enjoyed rougher experiences. It was a mutual preference, one that many people share. "Chloe, I've told you about my past marriage and its issues," I confessed. "But now, I think I'm in love with you. I've stopped seeing other women." "I'm glad to hear that," Chloe responded, her eyes softening. "Since we met, you're the only guy I've dated. I haven't even kissed anyone else. I really love you, Michael, but I'm worried about your trust issues regarding fidelity. Will you always have doubts about me? If I commit to being with you, I need to know that you'll address your trust issues." "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned," I admitted. "But if you promise to be faithful, I'll do everything I can to work on my trust issues." "All right," Chloe agreed. "It's a deal. I'll stay faithful, and you will too." 2 weeks later, I proposed, and we were married 3 months after that. Despite her parents living in Chicago, we decided to have our wedding locally. It was a modest ceremony. I invited Rachel and Hannah, both of whom I introduced to Chloe shortly after the proposal. Rachel was cordial, but visibly melancholic. I knew our connection wasn't built on love, but I could tell she would miss our physical moments together. I would have felt the same way. Chloe and I chose the Bahamas for our honeymoon, which was an unforgettable experience. Afterward, we settled into my apartment, and things went smoothly. We soon decided to start a family and were blessed with 2 children, Jacob and Emily, within 3 years. I was promoted to partner at my firm, and we bought a house in a nearby suburb. Rachel eventually married a coworker named Mark Bennett, a year after Chloe and I tied the knot. Mark was successful, and they had 2 sons, Daniel and Lucas. They moved near us, and our families often crossed paths. Our kids even attended the same preschool. Chloe and Rachel became friends, though Mark seemed wary of me. He sensed an underlying tension and doubt about my intentions around Rachel, and he was right. There was still an attraction between Rachel and me. Chloe noticed it too, but she trusted me completely, and even grew to trust Rachel not to encroach on our relationship. Mark, however, remained uneasy, despite our shared interests. Mark and I bonded over baseball, playing together on a men's team in an old-timers league and enjoying season tickets for MLB games. We occasionally attended games together, which helped to ease the tension between us. One day, while waiting to exit the garage at Gems Park, I decided to have an honest conversation with him about my past with Rachel. "Mark," I said after the game, "I want to be clear. I will never have a physical relationship with Rachel again. We're both married now, and I understand this concerns you." "That's quite direct," Mark responded. "We could be good friends if you trusted Rachel and me, but it's clear you two still have lingering feelings." "There's a history, sure," I admitted. "We were compatible, but I promise you, and I'm sure Rachel has said the same, that we need to move on from that." Mark looked thoughtful. "Whenever I see you two together, like at the club dance last month, it seems like you share something significant. Sometimes I wonder who she's thinking of when you're with her, me, you, or some movie star." "I can't deny that she crosses my mind occasionally," I confessed. "We had some great times, maybe even better ones than I've had since." "That's what really concerns me," Mark said, nodding in understanding. "I see your point now. I hadn't thought of it that way. Thanks for being honest." Despite this conversation, I wasn't completely truthful. The closeness I shared with Rachel after our divorce was unparalleled, and it still lingered in my thoughts, especially when I saw her. I suspected Rachel felt the same way. Perhaps if circumstances were different and we were both much older, we might revisit that past passion. But for now, I remained committed to Chloe and our life together.